There's an interesting article in First Things, which is a magazine I used to subscribe to. It's like a Catholic conservative, I guess mainstream conservative magazine or periodical. I used to be big on it back in the day, and I still pay attention to it, even though I've moved on from having the First Things perspective on the world. But it's interesting to see the way that the contemporary right is trying to deal with what they call the radical right, or the traditionalist, the more traditionalist right. The red pill people, whatever form it comes in. You see this kind of reckoning happening. You see this attempt to either reconcile with or to deal with in some way those to their right, those to the right of the respectable right, the establishment right. The sort of conservatism that you see amongst typical GOP voters and such. There's an effort to deal with this more radical right that's sprung up, and that has, what was known a few years ago as the alt-right. Now its own adherents call it the dissident right, and of course it's a loose conglomeration or loose confederation of lots of people with lots of different takes on things, but they all agree in generally not seeing the contemporary or establishment right as adequate. And there's an article about Dominique Venner that is actually up at First Things now, that I will link to below, and I recommend that y'all give a read, because it's interesting that they choose to write about Venner at this time. I remember when Dominique Venner committed suicide in the Cathedral of Notre Dame, of course, which after that suffered this catastrophe a few years later, of that catastrophe of dubious origins, right? But before that happened, he went there and shot himself while sitting in the pews of this monument to French greatness, and he did it as an act of protest against where the nation was going. And I remember at the time being in touch with somebody who, I can't remember her name right now, but a writer who contributed to alt-right journals mostly, but who at the time was able to work through a pseudonym and managed to write an article at the American Spectator, which I don't even know if they're still around, but managed to get sneak one in, which was a positive assessment of Dominique Venner, even if qualified, and qualified in the sense that she didn't necessarily the whole notion of suicide in itself is something that we have to one must qualify one's take on, whether it comes to a figure like Mishima or somebody else who does it in order to send a message, a suicide bomber, a kamikaze pilot. It's always it always has to be, if you're saying this is a person, this is a thinker who needs to be taken seriously, but in the context of them having kill themselves, then that's something you do have to qualify, or else you're definitely on some you're on some tricky ground there. But it's interesting that in any case, what I would say about the First Things article is that it's very interesting that this First Things article, at this point, at this juncture in 2024, has put forth this rather sympathetic take on Dominique Venner. Again, within limits, but much more sympathetic than you would have found it if the article had been written in 2011 when Venner committed suicide, and certainly much more sympathetic than it would have been written about if it had been written about him prior to the time when he committed suicide. Just if it had been written about him or his ilk, which include people like Evola and Spengler. These are like, ooh, these are big baddies. These are fascist tinged thinkers, and we got to avoid them. Now, even First Things is saying, Venner was right in a lot of ways, and what he did, we don't approve of suicide, but it as an act of protest, it makes sense because these people that are on what they call the radical right, what this article calls the radical right. That's kind of a more antiquated phrase, but basically talking about everybody who's not down with journals like First Things or National Review. Even though National Review is just pathetic and completely worthless now. But these more mainstream conservative journals. Now First Things is saying, yeah, we've got to pay attention because these guys were right. They were correct. They were right. They were right, but they were also in being right wing. But they were also correct in their assessment of what's happening to our culture in the West. And this article admits that Venner had it down. He knew what was going on, and his predictions, which seemed a little dour and a little dire and a little extreme, now in 2024 we have to admit they're not extreme. When you see the degeneracy that predominates in the West, when you see phenomena like mass immigration, and the proliferation of ever more depraved kinds of perversity being sold as normal. These are signs of real problems in the West, and that need to be really taken seriously. So it's interesting that even these people on the establishment right are now having to give, maybe somewhat grudging, tip of the cap to a man like Dominique Venner, because he was much more correct than their optimists were. Those end of history types, the neoconservative, neoliberal types who said once communism fell, it's the end of history and liberal democracy will reign forevermore, and that's a good thing. It's not shaping up that way anymore, and more people can see it. So read the article. I suggest that you give it a look and see what you think. Thanks for watching.